Luxy Banner.
Yeah.
Is that your full name?
It's not.
That's what you go by, or is it? Okay, what's your full name?
My full name is Luxana Mina Banner. Isn't that so fun?
Wait, is that first, middle, last? Or?
Yeah, it's my first, middle. That's my government name. That's
Lux. So Lux is your first name.
Luxana. Mina Banner. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Have you gone by Luxy most of your life?
All my life, yeah.
On purpose, or mean kids on the playground, or like family?
No, I think I don't know. I think just that's what my parents called me for short, and then it stuck. I feel very much like a Luxy. I feel like it really fits my personality.
Yeah, I agree. But I think we all have hindsight about people's names. Sure. So like, of course that person's named that.
Yeah.
Although I will say, I've gotten a lot of pushback on Dave recently. In like the last 2 years. Not because I think it's like becoming a Karen name, but people are like, why don't you go by David? Because it's my government name. But I've gone by Dave at home since I was a child.
Yeah.
And then when I went to middle school, people started calling me Dave, and that's just kind of stuck.
Yeah.
And that's, no one's ever thought twice about it. And then like recently people are like, you should go by David. Dave's such a lame old man name. I'm like, yeah, but I've kind of liked being the like only Dave that's not 50.
That's like a young person.
Yeah. Trying to like reignite the interest in it. But also there's so many Davids.
That's the thing. I feel like I've only known you as a Dave.
Yeah.
So I feel like
it fits.
Well, and I feel like you're full, like Dave Hawks. It fits. Like David Hawks,
you are
too many syllables.
You are the first person who has acknowledged that.
Yeah, I feel like it fits together.
I have felt that way my whole life.
Okay.
That I've always been known as Dave Hawks.
Dave Hawks.
It's just like the
you are,
name,
yeah.
right?
I feel like you are sort of like, I refer to you with a last name because Dave is like a common name.
Right.
Because I feel like if I'm like, I'm hanging out with Dave today.
Right. I'd be like,
who's
what
Dave?
are you talking about? There's
and
so
like,
many of
Dave
them.
Hawks.
Right.
It's like, oh.
Right. Right, but I don't
but
like
you are
making
sort of a first and last name.
Yeah, and I don't like making the analogy of like I'm a celebrity, but it's kind of how we think about celebrities.
Yeah.
Like his name is Tom, technically, but it's Tom Cruise, Tom Hanks, Tom Hardy, right? Like you would never be like Tom and be like, oh, the celebrity? It's like, no, I know him by his like full name. And if I just hear the first name, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like when they're doing
I love
speeches,
to do that as a bit though. I love to be like, oh my gosh, yeah. I was with Tom.
Yeah.
Tom?
Right.
Oh my God, Tom Cruise.
Yeah. I went to the UT game and me and Matthew were hanging out.
Matt.
What do you mean?
Sorry. McConaughey?
McConaughey. Oh, yeah. Do you even know how to spell it? Of course I do.
I do not.
No, I don't either. I have to look it up every time. And then I realize that's hard to really live a life with that last name. It's but true. It's special.
I mean,
I
think he's doing okay.
I think he's right. Yeah. Isn't it crazy that we have like so many people are coming to Austin?
Yeah.
So many people.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan's here now. Matt Rife apparently lives here now.
I only vaguely know who that is, actually.
So
He's like a comedian?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was told I have like pseudo vibes to him visually.
Okay.
And then I looked him up and now he's everywhere on my Facebook page because Facebook does that where it's like, oh, once you look up one thing, like here's a million more clips of them. Sure. And like he's like the super good looking, like not that that's why people think I look like that.
Oh my God. It's but, just like I'm a celebrity and I'm super good looking.
I know.
This is a great
I started this really poorly. I should have waited till the end to be as arrogant as I could be.
Oh my God.
But
actually, I'm so handsome.
Right? I would. Right? Mm-hmm. Well, I have to tell myself that. You know, self-affirmation. Someone's got it. But no, apparently that's like his brand is like he's upset that all the women just come to a show because he's good looking and they don't think it's funny, which is really a weird thing to hear.
It's a weird thing to say about yourself.
Well, right, and to acknowledge it because we obviously hear female comedians talk about like no one's appreciating my work and they're just like think I'm cute or whatever.
Yeah. Which is
happening.
No, and I'm sure he's like,
and
right.
I'm sure
he
that
is.
A lot of
Here's
those
the thing, I don't know this man.
Right, exactly.
I'm like, sorry to this man, I don't know.
It's okay. You'll see him.
Oh my God, now you've said it in like front of my phone and it's gonna like show up now. Yeah.
And I think he's quite funny and he seems like an endearing for how much influence he probably has and power he probably has to hurt people's feelings, right? Because of how many people love him. Like when you have that level of celebrity, then people are like, I'll do anything for you. He seems like a stand-up guy. He's also like really known to being... He is a stand-up guy. There you go. Wow, you beat me to it. But he's also like known for like liking older women. And so that's like his brand. Yeah. He appreciates maturity and
young
wisdom
gravy. vibes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think he was on Wild and Out, that show that Nick Cannon does forever ago. Mm-hmm. So I don't really know what his trajectory is. And I didn't really plan on taking this much time to talk about him. But
we're going to send this
back
to him.
Right? Like,
well, what's going to happen is I'm going to run into him. And I'll be like, I don't know who you are.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like
you
a
have
whole...
to do that. And then he's going to be like, what?
And then he's going to talk about me.
I thought you're the one person that doesn't love me.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have control over him.
I love that for me.
I think you're going to, you're crushing it out there.
Great.
All right. Well, anyway, welcome to this. I'm so glad you're here. It's been 9 years.
Yeah.
Since
going on
we
10.
were in the same room together. And we weren't even like close friends. Like I didn't know you before. Yeah. We were in the High School Musical Theater Awards together back when we were both theater kids.
They have renamed it now to instead of like
I know.
What is it now?
So
Heller?
It's the Hayas. The Haya Awards. The Heller Award for Young Artists. So the Hellers are like, it's named after them.
Oh.
So that's the family it's named after, but it's
cool.
the Hayas instead of Gatsmatas. Right.
Okay. I did the math on it.
It's the Hayas now.
Gotcha.
And so we met 9 years ago doing musical theater together. Yeah. And then we've just stayed connected online. Yeah. I just follow you. I like all your stories. Yeah. You're one of the few people whose personality I feel like I really get from their like digital presence.
Thank you. I feel like that's a compliment, at least to me, because that's something that I'm aware of. Mm-hmm. I feel like I never want to be like
the authenticity of it.
Yeah. Like I never want to be like, actually, this is all fake. And like it is. Like
right. It's the performance version of us.
Well, it's like it's just like highlights, but also it's
like the good stuff.
Yeah. But I feel like also I'm like, here's a picture of me crying.
Right.
Here's like, which like is a performance within itself.
Right.
But I'm like,
there's levels to
I
that.
feel like I try to be a person.
Uh-huh.
Like I try to be a real person.
That's huge and it's rare. And that's one of my favorite things about you. I mean, I only know so many things about you because we don't get a lot of time.
But well, you're also one of the few people, well, not few, but you knew me when I was like a fetus little tiny child, you know, like I was like, we were both little tiny children.
Yeah.
Which is just so funny to think about.
I know.
But
we were just talking about this, like now being adults, like getting a drink with your like teachers is wild.
It's so weird. Well, and it's also just like I feel like I sort of not like regress, but sometimes when you like meet someone after a couple of years that you like only knew as like a 13-year-old,
you just go back to that.
You're like, oh my God, do they still like you sort of like worry about it. I feel like you get this because you're also an Austin kid where like Austin kids just stay in Austin. And so sometimes you see them and you're like, oh my God, do you still see like a 13-year-old version of me? And it's like sort of stressful because you're like, no, I'm like I've formed.
Right. I've grown up a little bit.
Up.
Yeah. But also there's an escapism in like wanting it to not be gone. Like there is something about, especially with the friends I had in theater who like we don't get to hang out a lot or talk a lot, but there is this immediate, it's like your family. It's like
I was gonna say
when
on
we
the
get back together.
Other hand, you like I like understand.
Right.
You get where we've both come from.
It's like 9 years and we're like talking about life within 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because there's this, and I do think there's a part of it that's specific to the theater community and the level of vulnerability and just openness that you have because you do have a shared experience that's different.
And also very formative. I feel like especially with that select ensemble, it was like extremely formative for me.
Yeah.
Like, do you feel that way too?
Absolutely. Because I was like terrified the whole time.
I was so scared, but it was also like one of the first, I would say like quote unquote professional like theater experiences that I had because we performed at the Long Center, which is kind of crazy.
That's where like Broadway tours used to tour through before.
We were on a very big stage. I remember it was grueling in the way that they were like 10-hour dance rehearsal. And I was like, okay, me like 14. Yeah. Maybe like 15, 16. Yeah. But like still babies, like still little babies, you know, but we were like, okay, let's do this. And I feel like everyone was very serious about it because we were sort of like, we had like really worked to audition for that. Yeah. And like, and we were very like disciplined in it. So I feel like in that it was sort of a formative not trauma bond, but like a little bit, because we were just like working so hard, and we were like, okay.
Well, and it was like that was the highest level of success. Like the idea of going viral online wasn't an option.
Yeah, it wasn't
for us.
really a
like
thing.
We didn't have kids in our high school who were like famous on TikTok or Instagram,
because we didn't have TikTok.
Right.
I think Instagram was still like,
it was still like,
chill. Like it was still, we like, it wasn't curated yet.
No, it wasn't a marketing tool for the world yet.
Yeah. I don't think you could really monetize it at that point. And then, I mean, I remember we had like Twitter.
Yeah. Vine like was the big thing. Right?
That's
so, like,
what I was like, what did we have back then?
We had all those things. And so like that performance, like that was like, the stakes were so high. We were with the best of the best within the context of like our world. We were getting to be a part of it, but we were also like, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. Like we're not risking it.
Yeah.
And it was scary, and there was anxiety, but I just remember like getting off stage after like the opening number of the awards and being like, this dopamine that I'm feeling is just worth every moment of it.
Oh my God, yeah.
And the friendships, and you like cried, and you were. I mean,
all
that's
like,
theater people.
We were
all
like so close after, and like, yeah. I mean, it's very much a theater thing too, and I think talking to anyone who did theater, is a recovering theater kid.
Yeah, right.
is you know, it's part of your past. You have the same just like growing pains, and I think everyone sort of has the same mentality about stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's super valuable when like there's issues with educational theater for sure. And I think like, you know, kids have different experiences in it, but I do think there's like, I learned a lot of lessons about like discipline, and like not in a weird way, but like I learned how to be on time. I learned how to like take care of my stuff and be proud of my work, and be there for a team in a way. And like, I'm sure other people have that in like team sports.
Right.
But that was my team sport.
Yeah. It's, people will talk about, you know, why sports are so good. And I agree, right? Like life lessons in sports, and like, you know, when you get up and you get knocked down, and like you put in the, you know, the discipline, and you kind of grind in silence, and then you get to show what you've, you know, have accomplished, and it's really fulfilling. And I've always thought like the skills that you learn in theater specifically, I think there's a couple that are really unique. And one of them to me is communication skills. Even though you're pretending to be someone else when you're on stage, even though you're embodying another character, you have to become that person. And in life, when you walk into an interview, when you're meeting a stranger, you are putting on a character, a version of yourself where you have to be engaged. You want to be meaningful and compassionate and intentional. You want to look someone in the eyes. You want to speak clearly, being articulate. Fundamental values to success that are so much, to me, more profoundly important and will take you farther than, let's say, the information you learned in a degree. Yeah. Right. Or just like hard work for the sake of hard work. And so like, I'll always tell people, like, if someday someone's like, why are your kids in theater? If they want to be in theater, it's like, because they're learning skills that no matter where they go will be absolutely necessary.
Oh yeah. I feel like you aren't told that these soft skills are useful because everyone's like, arts are not useful. You know, it's useless. It's superfluous, whatever. But there are so many parts of being in theater or being in a creative industry that has taught me collaboration, that has taught me how to take feedback. Oh my God. The way that
other people's opinion of you and their critique, and listening to that and actually taking it seriously.
Being a 14-year-old, an adult being like, this was bad, which like is a whole other thing if it's not, you know, given the right way, but like having to like swallow that and correct your performance is something that I think a lot of adults don't know how to do. No, you know,
just the ego. Theater will break your ego.
Oh my, several times over. And just like I think that I was better at things when I was in, you know, when I was like so serious about theater. When I was like 16, I took it so seriously too. Yes. I was like, this is so life and death. But I was like, I've never applied myself more than like I was memorizing pages and pages of lines for stuff, you know, and I had a really good discipline. When I was in college, I had like a couple lead roles and stuff. And I'd never taken care of myself better because I was like, I can't get sick. Right. And I was like, I have to take care of my instrument, you know, like I've never taken care of myself as well as when I was like in a show, but also because I had to be there for the rest of my cast. Right. And you know, like, and then there's also like leadership qualities that you learn. I really am an advocate, even though I think a lot of people have a bad experience in theater. And I think that there's a lot of issues with how we treat young people in like school theater, because it can run rampant of just like a lot of emotional manipulation, right? That's something that I think educational theater has sort of a problem with. But I do think that I really value all of the skills that I've learned in that. And I wish that people took that more seriously, I think, in like, quote unquote, the real world, right? Yeah, no, I played sports, and there's a ton of like fundamental lessons in sports, right? Trusting other people, working with them, knowing that you can't do it by yourself. Hard work, like discipline when you're not there, like what you do on your own time affects that. And those are all true and good. And I don't disagree that like sports are like fundamental. To me, the theater piece of it was the added component of like sports are kind of generally accepted as like good to do. Yeah. And I don't ever want to claim to have been in a marginalized group of people. I'm smart enough to know to never do that. Right. But if you ask theater kids, we weren't exactly like, oh, you're in theater? Cool. You want to come hang out with me? 100%. And obviously that level of isolation, you know, just perpetuates the like culty vibes. 100%. But there's a level of you and I have an understanding of our unique interest in this. And there's an acceptance and a celebration of each other that transcends like just the thing we're doing. Like you won't see the water boy necessarily like hoisted on the shoulders, but like even the people doing tech and sound are like as celebrated and as appreciated. And there's so much of like every single person here has like a very clear role to play. And we all, you know, see that and recognize it. And obviously there's divas and there's lead roles and there's the things, but it's like when we all realize we all need all of us together, there's that extra level. And I know it's true in a lot of places, but I know that extra level of theater was not like a cool thing to be in. Yeah. And even like band, like obviously band is another one of those, like it's the arts. But there was an association in my mind with like smart kids are in band, which 100% helped them maybe. Like there was, I don't remember like any specific character quality being attached to like theater kids. Weird. That was like the character quality was positive, was right? The character quality was weird and annoying. Right, weird and annoying, loud, right? And here's the secret that not untrue, but I was gonna say the secret that I think that I'm realizing now as an adult is actually the tech theater kids were like definitely the coolest. Oh my god, yes. They were definitely the coolest. They were the adults. They were like, y'all are the worst. Literally, get on your I can't believe that they were the ones like building sets. Now looking back, I'm like, why were we trusting these like 14-year-olds with drills? Right. But they were like, they did a really good job. Yeah, no, none of us like got injured. And now I feel like all the tech theater kids I know are really cool. Yes. and they're all doing have like cool really stuff. Cool skills. Right. And like they can like fix their home and they're like running like tours for like pop stars. Right. You know, they're like, oh yeah, I just like am the backstage crew for this. And I'm like, that's so cool. That's like, you guys are so cool. Yeah. We didn't give you your flowers. Right. Exactly. We were not appreciative, but no, theater is a shared. Yeah. I think there's a lot of trauma bonding that theater kids have felt, but to me, it's also about the director. Like I agree with you. There's a lot of issues and concerns with education in general, and then education in general within the arts is even another. It's a harder, more specific. Having parents so much more involved in advocating for their kids has its pros and cons in terms of like talent versus
equal representation versus like,
I was going to say, I think it all boils down to egos.
Right.
And if you are with a director that has a certain ego about stuff, you may not be treated like you actually are a 13-year-old about stuff, you know, like, and even in college, I feel like it's like, yes, this is a professional space, but we're all learning. So I think there is some, you know, I think we've all been in like theater companies where it's like they ran that like the Navy,
right?
Like,
yes.
They ran that like it was the military.
Militant, yes.
But it's, you know, giving space for learning.
Right. And
it's nice to be in those situations.
And even the militant teachers, if they were able to balance that with humor and joy and relationship
and empathy,
then it was awesome.
Yeah.
Like getting yelled at by someone who also like who made fun of you, but then also like reminded you how great you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. Because in some ways, not being treated like a 13-year-old is very helpful. It's right. Yeah. Being treated like professionals in some sense is really valuable.
Because it's the first time you're like taken seriously as like a kid.
Right.
They're like, okay, you have all these lines to memorize and you get to be the lead and you get to like do all this stuff. And you're like, sick. Like this is, I have responsibility for the first time. And I'm lauded for my talents for the first time, even though I'm a little tiny baby child. But I have responsibility. But then it's also like, on the other hand, it's like, you know, kids mess up and they should be treated with empathy and kindness when that happens. So it's a balance for sure. And I think the best theater teachers have that balance.
Right. And yeah, I think the spotlight and the stage is a really good accountability partner in a way that you don't have in sports. Like you can't take a lead off and like if they're not performing well and put in the understudy in the middle of the show. You
have to figure it out. I think my best figure it out like skills are from you know, show must go on.
Right. It's because it's like everyone's watching me. Like I can't not be prepared because there is no like, emergency button. There is no escape. It's just humiliation and fear if I forget my lines. Right. Like, but also leaning on your making sure that other people around you know your lines, can give you a lead up, like those 100%. Things. But it's not the same as, oh, you're like slow. Like we'll sub you out. We'll sub you out and put someone else in. And so having the like public speaking fear really at that age like helps. And I haven't realized.
Did you sort of have like a public speaking fear?
Yeah, so I had huge stage fright, and people are so surprised to know that, because I now am very comfortable on stage, very comfortable in front of the camera, and I love it. Now, it's probably a lot of ego for me. Like I like the attention, and I like making people laugh.
But you've practiced it.
But because I've done shows enough, and because I've been in front of people, and because I've intentionally worked on learning how to articulate what I'm wanting to say and what needs to be said, and thinking through things. It's an invaluable skill, because public speaking will go with you forever. It might not be from the stage, but it might be from a meeting. You might be leading a meeting. You might be leading a cohort of some sort. You might be dedicated to like lead a group of people to go do some project. And it's like, you might not be on stage, but you have to speak with intentionality and then sometimes with authority. And if you don't have practice at that, it's hard later, and you can't avoid it. Like you just don't avoid public speaking in some sense, no matter what your job is. And so theater like really helps you practice for that. But I'm going to move us on from theater because we could talk about this forever. So, I mean, people who follow you know this, but you are doing a lot of cool things. You're like the face of Whataburger at this point. God. You have been in commercials. The face of my Whataburger. Because
I'm just my face is there.
The only Whataburger stuff I see is you when your friends are posting it. So you haven't actually done theater for a while.
I haven't. I was going to say
into like corporate film, commercials, short films. But like, what are you doing? Like what? When someone says like, "What do you do, Lux?" What do you say?
I mean, I say I'm an actor. I feel like a lot of people. So this is like random, but I was going to say when we were talking about like stage fright, I have not done theater in so long that I think I've actually sort of, especially post-pandemic too, I feel like I sort of have stage fright now. Like it's different.
Right.
I haven't done it in so long, but I recently like had a nightmare that I had to audition for a musical and I like wasn't prepared, and I literally was a nightmare. Like I was like really nervous in it. So it's something that I would like to get back into, but on the flip side, I'm way more comfortable in front of camera.
Right.
I think I feel like I was talking to somebody about this recently, but they're like, gosh, like how are you
so
comfortable
natural.
in front of camera? And I'm like, well, that's what I've been doing for the last 5 years. I've just been in front of camera. I've had a camera right here. You know, I've been crying in front of camera. I'm doing everything like just to get comfortable in front of a camera.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm mainly in the film and I haven't done TV yet, but film and TV commercial space.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really like it.
How did that happen? Like, how did you know film was going to be like the goal? Because some people do theater knowing they want to do film once they get to school. I know a little bit about how different film acting is from theater stage acting.
Yeah.
Was film like something you knew you wanted to do, or was it like that's where the money is and so I'm going there?
Well, that helps, but I always wanted to do film. In school, I actually, like in high school, I like took AVP, like audio video production, and I did that a couple of years, and I actually really wanted to, and I still do, but my focus has sort of shifted. I really wanted to direct and produce and be on that side of it. I did a lot of film when I was younger, and I just wanted to write movies. And then like when I was a kid, I did have my little like 15 minutes of child acting stardom.
Yes.
Because I did Barney when I like did a episode or two of Barney when I was a kid. I took because I like took a camera acting class, and they were like, you should audition for this, because I was just a cute little kid, I'm sure.
Right.
And then I did like some commercial stuff and all of that. And then I took a break from that. Did theater when I was sort of in high school and then I majored in acting, but did theater throughout college, and then sort of got back into film. My junior year of college, my like AVP professor from high school was like, hey, this girl that you went to high school with is like shooting something in Austin. And I had known about her since she was kind of like, at least to me, sort of a celebrity in our high school, because she was like a senior when we were freshmen, and she had directed this movie when she was like 18 that had like made it to South by. And I was like, oh my God, this is like sick. She's so cool. She'll laugh at me saying this because like now I know her very well, and she's like a friend of mine, but I thought she was the coolest person. So my AVP teacher, and like thank God she did, shout out Vanessa Mokri, she like emailed me and was like, you should audition for this, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that I had like done much film as an adult before then. I think I just always wanted to, and I had always like talked about writing movies, and I just love movies. I love movies and I love television, and it was always the goal. And I originally, even sort of backtracking, I originally wanted to, I like went to St. Ed's for college, and I was like, well, I'm going to transfer out and I really wanted to go to Chapman in California for a film and TV acting program. And then I was like, I ended up really liking St. Ed's, and I just didn't want to transfer and kind of do that. So I didn't do that, but it was sort of always the goal. Junior year, I auditioned for this little like mini series thing. I booked it, had like the best time. Yeah. Everyone on that set was amazing. Emily was amazing. She was directing it. And it was also like, I feel very lucky to have worked with like a young female director for one of my first projects too. Like that was very encouraging, because she just got it. Yeah. But it was just like very chill, very cool. Everybody was really nice. And then Emily just kept like hiring me back, which was like, I owe her so much, I feel like. And I've told her this, and she's like, no, you don't. But she hired me back for a couple shorts, and then I just started doing like film stuff and connecting with other people that I met on that set or other sets. And then I just started auditioning for like the UTRTF stuff. And I was like, yeah, let me just like do these student films and learn how to be on a set. I had like done some extra work, which like we all do our extra and background work. I feel like you do it just to get to know what it's like to be on a big set. And I just really liked it. I just really liked what it was like. It's very different from theater in the way that it's not as, I don't know. It's obviously it's more compressed.
Right. So more structured too. It's not like
I was going to say it's like, it's a more structured process, but it's different. The structure is different because I think theater is structured as well in the way that you like learn, this much of the script and you bond and you block and whatever. But it is sort of a compressed situation, which is also sort of challenging in the way where you're like, okay, I have to like be a person and listen. And I was like obsessed with, and I still am like obsessed with learning what everybody does on set, because with theater, you sort of learn what tech does, but you also sort of know because you're like there with them while we're sort of building it all from the top or the bottom to the top. Whereas on set, I was like, what's the gaffer do? I don't know what that means. And you see all these people doing all these little tiny things and you're like, what do you like, how do you do that? And, someone's like pulling focus and you're like, what is that? And so I feel like I was just getting on set, just like listening and just trying to like look at what everybody did. So, and yeah, I had a really fun time, and film and theater people are very different. And I love them both, but it was really fun to like get to know film people. And I think that also, I just got along with everyone that I worked with, thank God.
Right.
And yeah, long story short, so I like worked with Emily on this like mini series. She hired me back for another short. That short went to South by, and then I got my agents from that, which I feel very lucky. I feel bad when people ask me for advice of like, how'd you get signed with your agents? And I was like, I got super lucky.
Yeah.
I got super lucky and they found me, and I'm so grateful to be with them. And then I also just like worked for free for a while.
Which is kind of necessary for any arts.
Yeah. And I had a blast doing it. Right. I have so many like genuine friends now that I met through doing like wackadoo little shorts from, when we were, I had graduated college by this time, but I think they were still at UT, like seniors and juniors doing like thesis films. And yeah, I worked for free for a while and I had a really good time doing it and I learned so much.
Right.
But yeah.
So I'm going to give you a second to brag. What's the coolest or maybe biggest project you've gotten to work on? That you're allowed to talk about.
No,
maybe,
I can talk about it.
I
won't be specific.
A streaming
or I will, but probably I did this indie that is coming out pretty soon.
Did you just post a clip of this?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah. Because I recognized the guy in it.
Yeah. So
and I was like, oh,
I think that I feel like that's probably the biggest thing. It's definitely the first like lead role that I've had in a feature film. And it was super indie.
When you say super indie, do you mean like what does that mean?
Like lower budget. Okay. Not a huge like production in terms of like cast and crew. Very like we all sort of helped out. But I'll tell you a little bit about the story of it. I won't tell you the name, but you can look it up. But yeah, so I did that December 2021, I think. So a couple years ago now. And I didn't even like audition for it. It's a long story, but I'll tell you the short version of the story. But basically a friend of mine like knew the director, pulled me onto the project to just like work on it. So I actually ended up working like pre-production on it. And I had never worked pre-production on stuff, but I was like kind of just like an intern for it. There were scheduling conflicts with the main actress. I really liked the script, and the director and I would go through the script together a lot. And so I knew it backwards and forwards. Because I was also there like every single day. And I also like did not know what I was doing pre-production wise. I fully did not know, but I was like emailing like for locations, and I was like, can we shoot here?
Right.
And they're like, you need, this permit. And I was like, fuck, like, I don't know.
Right.
I did not know what I was doing.
Right.
So, good thing that I wasn't doing that in the end. But long story short, I ended up playing that role. And it's a funny story. That director is a quirky man. And since I like knew the script so well, and I play a very like sassy sort of like almost like an Aubrey Plaza-esque sort of character. Yeah. So I feel like I sort of took on that personality like half the time. So I was like like half of the production.
Right.
In a good way, in the way that I think I was like completely unfazed by the fact that I was working with like these amazing actors that have been working in the industry forever.
Right.
But yeah, and I feel like I'm looking back now and I'm like, oh my God, I'm in this movie with all of these like really cool people. Like half of that cast is an Oppenheimer.
Heck yeah.
Stupid. But anyways, that's that.
Just a little name drop right there.
I mean, like they're all like whatever. It's whatever, but
they're on the payroll.
I mean, they are there, but yeah. So that's probably like the biggest thing I've worked on, and it's like coming out soon. Hopefully, it's in an international film festival, which is like sick, and I am very proud of my work in that, and I think that's something that I'm also like. I'm like, okay, I can like say that. It's really hard to feel proud of your work sometimes because you're like, oh, well, or like I at least like have huge imposter syndrome about stuff all the time.
Yeah, me too.
So that's probably like the biggest thing I've worked on recently, but I've gotten really close, and I'm like counting those as wins too. With just like audition callback stuff. I guess maybe a year and a half ago. Yeah, something like that. Like a year and some change ago, signed with like an LA manager, and that was also, I was like, oh my God, like I can't believe this. Like I'm so like, and I feel like I sound like a douche whenever I'm like, yeah, I was like manager in LA, but it's like that was a really huge win for me because it also was like, oh my God, like I'm auditioning for like real stuff. Not to say that any of that stuff is like not real, but like TV shows, like stuff that the person who got cast outside of me was in an HBO show. Right. So that's like been really cool, and I'm like really happy with that. And I know it's like, I mean, obviously this year has been super weird, but I like have to like pat myself on the back for even like I got a producer. Can I brag for a second?
Please do.
I got a producer call back. I feel like I talk about this all the time, but you know what? Fuck it. It's like the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. And I'm just going to talk about it. And until something cooler happens, I'll talk about that. But I got called back for this Apple TV show. And I ended up reading on Zoom with Jason Segel.
What?
And it was so cool. I was so nervous. Obviously, I didn't book it, but I like did not. I just, it was really cool.
Was like, it his show? Was it the show that he's in?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like
heck yeah.
I got a call back for it. And you know, I don't know how many people they called back or whatever, but it was like the first time that I was like in a really professional, like, this is the big leagues, dog. Like, yeah. So I feel like I always like name drop that, but I'm like, guys, that's so like not in like a way, but I'm like, it was really cool, guys. Yeah. Like, oh my God, he said my name. Like I have to give myself, a pat on the back for stuff like that, because it is like, it's so hard. It's like so hard, and you just have to be patient with a lot of that stuff. And like, yeah, I didn't get cast, and it like totally crushed me for like, a week. Right. But I was like, okay, that was like my second audition that I had with my manager too. Like, I think that was like maybe the second or third audition that I had like been given from him, because I had just signed with him. And that was like, I don't know, it was very validating too, that it's like, okay.
Yeah,
like,
that's huge.
It's like, okay, no one is like, it's validating in the way that you're like, oh, okay, I think I'm doing the right thing. Like, I think I'm doing something right. Because because I feel like also, especially like as an adult pursuing acting, it's like different from when you're a kid. Because when you're a kid, it's like you don't have to pay bills. Like you don't have to like worry about you don't have to worry about like your parents. You know, there's a point when you get older, at least for me, where I'm like, okay, like my mom's getting older, like or like all my friends are getting married,
right?
And they're having like kids. I mean, none of my friends have kids yet, but they're getting married, you know? And you have to be like, okay, like that's
right.
You have to like make money.
Yeah.
You have to make money and you have to like do those things. And I do feel like at some point with acting and any creative thing, really, you get to this point where people are like, okay, grow out of that, you know? Like there is sort of like a grow out of that mentality of like, are you going to keep doing this? Are you going to, what's your plan B? Are you going to settle down? You know, that kind of thing. Or just like, I don't know. Sometimes I have the insecurity where I'm like, I'm going to do this until someone has someone like not told me that I'm bad at this.
Right. Yeah.
Has someone like continued to let me think this? Right. Like, am I like delusional? Which is like obviously not true. It's just my imposter syndrome.
Right.
But it's like nice to have evidence of like that you can't refute. There's like nice to have
those wins
like to be like, oh no, they wouldn't just like do this. Right. They're not doing like
they're not dumb. No
one is doing this because they feel bad.
Right.
You know, like sometimes you're like, oh well,
you have to say
they cast
this,
me because or like
feel bad
you know,
it.
Your friends will be like, you did such a good job, and you're like, you're saying that because you're my friends. Yeah. You know, like whatever.
I relate to that so hard. I am so quick to explain away compliments.
Oh my God, me too.
To the point where some of the most profound compliments I've held on to are from strangers.
Oh my God, yeah.
Because it's like, you have no reason to come up and tell me this thing.
Yeah.
So if you're telling me, like, it must be true. Like, because you have no reason. Same thing with like relationships. I've never like been approached by like a girl out and about with like, hey, do you want to?
I'm sure that's a lie.
No, that's true. I've never been like, hey, I just noticed you and saw you and I'm going to talk to you. Sure. But I have met people who we met for, you know, shared interests and or our friends were friends. And they made a comment where I was like, whoa, you actually think that. Like you have no stakes in like keeping my feelings from being hurt. So there's no reason for you to give that compliment. And in some ways, like sometimes it's the people who don't know you who can have the biggest impact.
Oh yeah.
Because I'm so good at being like, well, yeah, like it's the right thing to say you did a good job. You're not going to say you did a bad job and it's a bad job. So it's like, yeah, it's easy to explain those things away. But no, that's huge. I mean, that's objectively huge. Clearly, you know, you are crushing it, right? Like it's hard.
It feels right, like not.
But you have to let other people say that for you, right? Because you can't. It wouldn't be good to be like, I'm amazing. Now, unfortunately, in the performing world, you have to have a little bit of like, I'm better than them, but cast me. You have to have that.
I mean, I think confidence.
Right,
yeah.
Right. You have to have that, and the line between confidence and arrogance,
thin.
Really, to me, I draw that line when it comes to entitlement. Like, as soon as you expect it, you've crossed the
100%
the line into past confidence. But if you believe I'm qualified and I'm good enough, that's great, and you need that.
Literally, something that I'm working on is sort of that line of like, no, like I can believe in myself,
right? Because
there is always like, have you seen Barbie yet? Okay, well there's
I have to see Oppenheimer now first.
I still haven't seen it. I need to. It's 3 hours long though.
I know. Yeah.
What was I saying?
Barbie.
Oh, there's like a line. America Ferrera has this like long monologue, and about like being a woman. And there is like but always be grateful.
Yes.
You know, you can do this, but you have to always be grateful. And I feel like I feel like I was very much like taught that, and I abide by that. But it's like, yeah, always be grateful. But I'm like learning to celebrate my own successes and like learning to like, okay, if, you know, I have to pat myself on the back sometimes, because it's like, if I don't, it's like a very unhappy life, you know. Right. It's like if I never feel like I'm doing anything am like, oh, well, that's this, or just like explaining away everything. Like, I'm never going to be happy with it. And it's like, why do this stuff if I'm not going to be happy with it? And I feel like having a partner too is sort of like eye-opening in that way, because they're like, hey, that was really cool. You realize
that was awesome?
Yeah.
That you just got to do that?
They're like, oh my God. And like, yeah, my partner is very much like, hey, stop it. That was really cool. And like brags on me, you know, for that. And it's like, that's really cool. He's like so like he is more upset that I didn't book that than I am. He was like, like, no, you knocked it out of the park.
I'm never watching this show now because I can't support it after
like
such a
very
bad choice.
Silly. But yeah, I think it's a line. It's a balance.
Well, and practicing gratitude means you have to acknowledge the blessings you have.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I'll go to the grave saying that, like, you want to find joy in life, be great, have an attitude of gratitude, right? Like being grateful for the things you have is just a better way to live. Because like, yes, we should work on things that are broken. But if you spend all of your emotional energy complaining and even just fighting for change, in whatever circumstance, in your relationship, in your workplace, whatever, in the world, culture, if you don't also stop to say, but here's why it's worth it, here's the great things, it does become, like you're saying, super defeating. Because if you just only focus on what's broken, you can't appreciate and enjoy. And so for you, it's like, if your blessings are your accomplishments, then you have to lean into those and be like, these are amazing. Like, this is super cool.
Yeah.
And you have really objective milestones to point to of like, like that, is my manager stupid or not? Well, if I don't think they're stupid, then them hiring me means I must be doing something well.
Yeah.
If I was able to get into the room with a A-list celebrity, right, and I'm reading lines with him in a professional way, I'm not paying for his meet and greet, and he's not signing something for me.
Well, and it's
he's
like,
treating me like a professional. That's a huge milestone.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, and it's like, I really had to tell myself too, like, nobody does things, like, people do things to like be nice, but like nobody
not
really,
here. Not
nobody really, like not at that level. Nobody's like giving you a bone. Like they really won't, because it feels like it too. Like they really are not giving you a bone when it comes to stuff like that. Like they're not doing this. They're not wasting.
They're not doing you a favor.
They're not wasting time. They're not doing that. So yeah, I think that in terms of like accomplishments, I'm like, okay, yeah, I did that.
Heck yeah.
So anyways.
So you're in film, but you also do some modeling. What's the difference between the two for you?
I mean, I feel like I sort of just fell into modeling just because I like knew photographers and
just getting asked to be in everyone's portfolio.
No, I mean, no, not like that, but just like, you know, collaborating with people that I'm like friends with. And then also I think I started doing it genuinely as like an exposure therapy thing, to be in front of the camera.
It's so good for you.
Yeah. And I think that was sort of where I started, because when I was like doing student films, I was also just like, yeah, like I'm gonna shoot, you know, like with whoever. I mean, not whoever, but you know, like let me do this stuff and sort of just like figure out, I don't know, what I look like on camera, and like and figure out what that relationship is, because it is a technique, like it is like a skill to like be comfortable on camera. And so I think that's sort of just where it started. I don't consider myself a model, but I'm like, yeah, I model. So I've been paid for it. So I guess maybe that's where you draw the line of like, no, I am. But you know, so I sort of am like, oh, I'm not tall enough. I'm not skinny enough, you know, like, but it's like, yeah, like I do it. And I enjoy doing it too, especially with the right people. But yeah, I think it really just started out as me trying to figure out how to be on camera, how to be comfortable on camera. And then also just to like, this sounds stupid, but like figure out like what you look like on camera too. Cause that is sort of like a weird cognitive dissonance of like, you look in the mirror and then you look at yourself on camera and they like are not the same thing.
They are not the same
at
thing.
all. And then you have to like, you know, people talk about like finding your angles, but like you have to figure out, okay, like if I do this, how does it look? I remember I was shooting that short or like the mini series with Emily. And I think I remember like looking back at the footage later and I was like, oh my God, my posture is so bad. And I remember just seeing that and I was like, why? Like, I just didn't know how to carry myself. Granted, theater, like my theater training was huge about like me like feeling in my body and
stage presence,
like stage presence.
Yep.
But I think I sort of like froze up on camera about that. And so doing like modeling, I would, especially because there is more of like you can see your photos a little bit faster because they'll take them and I'll be like, hey, can I look at it just to adjust and stuff. And so that was just like it really was like a trial and error thing where I was like, okay, I looked bad doing this. And, I don't know, I just learned how to behave in front of camera in different ways. And there is like a difference between like, when you're modeling, you're trying to look beautiful, right? Or like, or whatever is serving the theme of the
purpose of the shoot.
Yeah. Whereas like acting, I don't feel like you should ever be thinking about being beautiful unless that's like, and like be very authentic. But there is like, I needed to learn how my face is because I'm like clearly a very expressive person. And especially being like a theater person and coming from that background, I was like way too big for a little bit. And so I had to like learn the muscles in your face, like, you know, just to keep the authenticity and preserve like a real human reaction. And also like not looking like a crazy person on camera.
Well, it's because in theater, all they teach us is more.
Well, and always like back of the house,
The director's like, I would always rather you to be asking
more
to
and then pull
bring
you
it
back.
down more than to like get more out of you.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that too, because to me, I have found that in photography, stage performance is actually better for photos than film performance because people think. So I've worked with some people who do film and they're very used to small adjustments. And I'm like, sorry, this doesn't read. Like you think you're making 4 different facial expressions, but your face has barely moved at all.
Exactly.
Because you don't have it in real time. You don't see the adjustments and all those things.
Well, and half the time with film, it is so close up that it is not even about like an adjustment to your face. It is like if you think something different, you can see it in your eyes and it's like totally different.
Yep.
Whereas like that will never work for theater. Right. Ever.
Yeah, it's like you think you're doing something special and it's like nobody. The nuance you think that you're portraying and you're just like such a complex person and all the emotions are going on in your mind. It's like no one can read that. Like you have to use your whole body to like communicate that. So I think that's super interesting because I have run into how to navigate photography is a lot about image. Like it's at a really fundamental level, very superficial because it's about image. And it's generally about making beautiful images or good images or, pretty images. And people want to be pretty and they want to look good. Like, and it's been an interesting thing, especially as a man working with primarily women, because I don't have a lot of men who are like, take my photo. How to like navigate helping someone feel beautiful, helping position and pose someone to look good without also projecting my like
standard
version
of
of what I think looks good. And so from like a beauty culture perspective, have you run into challenges with like modeling and feeling like maybe you're perpetuating things that you don't like, or have you felt like it's been a tool to help celebrate and help bring attention to other standards, different ideas, different concepts? Like, has that been interesting for you? How have you navigated that?
I think, so when you're talking about like positioning or just as a photographer, like giving direction, but not wanting to like sound weird about it. I do think that I've gotten this note and I actually really liked the way that she put it. I was doing a shoot and she was like, I just really love the lines that you're creating. And I love that. That's like also speaks to me as sort of like a person who had like dancer experience too. Like that's sort of like oh, that's very, I love that phrase. Yeah. I think that's a really good way to look at it too. And especially like, I don't know, I'm like not a photographer, but I'm someone who looks at photography and watches a lot of movies. Mm-hmm. And so I think in sort of a visual aspect, that's like a cool way to look at it, to be like, oh, you know, like you learn about rule of thirds when you're like, I don't know, like 15. You're like, this makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. But I think lines is a great way to think about it. I mean, I literally just said like, I'm not tall enough. I'm not skinny enough. You know, right. That sort of side of modeling is honestly something that like I would love to develop enough. And like, I also say this as like a very conventionally attractive, skinny, tiny person. Like right. I absolutely benefit from those things, but it's like, yeah, of course, you know, everyone has their insecurities. And I think the modeling industry is such a weird behemoth of you have to look exactly this mm-hmm. way. And I think it's breaking out of that. But part of me, like, I have no desire to
fit into that box.
Just like, I don't know. It seems very scary mm-hmm. and sort of overwhelming in terms of like, at this point in my life, I think that mentally I'm like not ready to enter into that space in a professional way that I have to think about my body as an object, right. like for money. Mm-hmm. Although, you know, acting is like you could argue that acting is very similar in that way, but at least there's like I don't feel as much that it is about every part of my body in sort of an objectified way, because there right. is like, you can be the prettiest person on earth and you can still be a bad actor.
Yes.
So I think modeling is, and I think modeling is still a skill. I'm not saying that that's not a thing. You can still be a very beautiful person and be a terrible model.
Also, yes.
But there is sort of, you know, especially with like, I don't know, like editorial or commercial, there is just like there's like a weird, you're mm-hmm. thinking about your body in capitalistic terms thing that I think that sort of part of it is sort of scary and weird. And I hate thinking about it like that. Mm-hmm. So I'd rather just, I don't know. I like shooting with people that I know, and
always
for like, if I do like a shoot with a brand, I like to make sure that it's something that like I feel passionate about as well, and that it's a comfortable environment, and that it's never something that I feel uncomfortable with. And I think if I really entered the like modeling space in that way, I think it would be maybe I would feel like I would have to compromise some feelings for the check. I don't know. You know, that's always a thing, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think this has been it's been a challenge for me to navigate as a man. It's been hard for me to navigate as someone whose primary desire is to love the human in front of me and not the art mm-hmm. or the muse. Mm-hmm. And I talk about this a lot. And, you know, when I go into a photo shoot, my primary priority is to make sure that the other human being that's showed up, that said yes to trusting me with their name, image, and likeness, their body, that their experience during this time is comfortable, is safe, they're respected, and hopefully they feel celebrated, right? Mm-hmm. Like, regardless of what the photos are, regardless of if they come out good or not, I want to make sure that the experience is positive. And the difficulty is that in some sense, you have to dehumanize the individual for the art. And there has to be this really clear understanding that we're compartmentalizing our values as humans, stepping into this space to get photos, and then we're checking back in as people.
Yeah.
And it's also why I have not pursued a full-time job in modeling, because as a photographer, I think I'll end up full-time job in photography, because as the photographer, I'll end up having to ask people or having to shoot things that I'm like, I don't feel like this is the type of stuff that is honoring you, right? Because at some point you have to submit to the paycheck or the person who's saying this is what we need, or we're picking this person because of these looks. And you do dehumanize people, right? And there's kind of no shame in it. There's no like whatever. It's like everybody just get in, everybody's like changing in front of each other. We're just forgetting about all the like regular social standards we normally have because it's this and it's like go, go, go. And there's no like comfort check-in. And I get that has been necessary for the success of what has happened. But I also am like, but I don't want to approach a shoot where I'm dictating what you can and can't wear.
And that's not, I don't think there's anything bad in those things. I've definitely done commercial shoots that it's like, yeah, I mean, like I do hand modeling on the side sometimes, which is like totally whatever. It's, not artistic. It's I just go and like I do product photography and it's for, I just hold something, right? It's like not artistic, not fulfilling, but it's whatever. I will say I do that with like a studio here in Austin that I like actually really like everyone there. And that's the only reason why I'm still doing it is because I like all the photographers there and they're very chill. And it's like not an artistic thing, just a side job. It's just like a fun little side quest that I do. And yeah, it's weird because I think as a creative that is sort of like public facing in just the way that like, yeah, people will perceive how I look. That is literally part of my job is to be perceived. It's crazy. You know, it's sometimes you think about it and you're like, oh,
yeah,
like I have to be perceived as my job, but there's nothing wrong with, that kind of modeling is modeling and it's a career. And I just know that I think for me mentally, that's not something that I feel like I am in a space to take on.
Right.
And
that's
I think
very wise of you though, to even be aware of that before you step in. Because a lot of people, they say, oh, people want to take my picture and that's fun. And I like the photos.
Yeah.
And then they get 6 months into it and they have a photographer say, hey, well, this company wants you to do this. And then you're like,
well, and it's also like,
I haven't drawn my boundaries.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I've learned in the past couple of years, I think, is learning how to draw my own boundaries and setting them for myself. And yeah, like I think, one day if I like feel like that's a professional space that I can get into, like, yeah, I'll whatever, cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like I know myself well enough right now that I'm like, I actually have no desire to make that my like main thing. And also because I love acting and I think that those are, I don't know, they're two different things. But yeah, I think that I'm glad that you feel that way about shoots and seeing someone as a whole person. Whereas like, I do know that like professional models, like it is part of your job description to kind of like not be a person. And I also, models, correct me if I'm wrong, like I'm not in that space, but I feel like part of it is like, yeah, like if I'm doing e-commerce, like they're going to cut me off, they're going to cut my head off of the body and I'm just wearing the clothes, which is fine.
Right.
But obviously it is a little bit like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. And
right. Your value is not for your personality in this moment. And so I think
it still can be, but it's like, yeah, this is not artistic.
Right.
This is not something that is,
like your worldview and your, like what you bring to something. That's not what we need you here for right now.
Yeah, not necessarily. And I think there is obviously the like, yeah, of course you're going to want to work with people that see you as a person outside of that work.
For sure.
But the work is not going to see you as this like full multifaceted, multidimensional person. And not to say that everything does. Whataburger doesn't see me as a multidimensional person. But, I was lucky enough that nobody on that set was like weird and I didn't feel like just a head or just a hand or just an arm or just a leg. And I think that's just something that you have to, if you're doing something like that, you also just take care of yourself outside of that. But It's complicated. It's like, it's weird and complicated and like weird to think about if you think about it too hard.
Yes. And it's like, you have to do regular check-ins.
Yeah.
You have to say, hey, where are we at? What are we doing? And hey, this new opportunity came to present itself. What are the things to think about? What are the implications? I run into that a lot, where people will send me inspiration photos for shoots they want to do. And I'm like, do you realize what you will have to do to recreate this? Mm-hmm. Like, I know that this is, relatively artistic and artsy, but it's a little revealing. Mm-hmm. And like, you need to know that that's what you would be doing. Mm-hmm. And what are the security guards that I need to have in place to be respectful of you and what your comfort level is with privacy. And people just don't always think through the difference between what's in the photos versus the shoot itself. And what does that mean wardrobe wise? And what does that mean edited photo wise? And what's in a raw photo versus what's in an edited photo? What am I comfortable with the photographer doing?
You can
and all those
always
things.
sort of be like, I like this concept, but then I think, I think you and I are people that are extremely aware of that. And I'm extremely aware of my image, just because I have to be. And now, and like, as we talk about being in front of camera, I'm very aware of it now. And also just like socially, right? Like that's just, I just think about it. That is part of my job. It sounds sort of like I don't know. It sounds sort of like, ugh,
a little superficial.
So,
like
superficial, but it's just like,
it is your image. It's like
literally my job now.
It's kind of what I'm paid to. This is a skill that I now need to hone because it's my job to make sure I look the way that I know I should for this thing that someone's paying me to do. Exactly.
And it's something that I just have to be careful about. And and also just, I feel like women more often are more aware of it just in general because of the society that we live in, right? You are aware of your image. But I do think, there is sort of like maybe the average civilian like doesn't think about it as much.
They just think like, oh, it'd be super cool to be so attractive that someone wants to take my picture. And it's like, well, there's a lot more.
And they should be. They should feel that way.
Right.
But I mean, it's complicated and I think it's unique to every person. But I think it is important to meet someone where they are with their self-image too, of just seeing like, okay, this is what you feel empowered to do. And it's like, I mean, going back to like, personally, I'm pretty aware of what I feel comfortable with and what I don't feel comfortable with. And I can work on the things that I don't feel comfortable with. But I know right now, like, I wouldn't feel comfortable with certain aspects of my body being shown or whatever, like, and then, going back to acting, like, I think every actor has that like conversation with their management, or they should, with agents and managers of like, okay, what do you, I feel like it's usually phrased as like, what are you willing to do? Which is like sort of a weird way to phrase that, but it's like, what is your boundary and like, what do you feel comfortable with? In terms of your body and also just in terms of like content, because that's also, your emotional image is just as important. I don't know. I'm sort of rambling, but
no, I think what you just said about the question, what are you willing to do, is the wrong question.
I feel like because I've gotten that.
Yeah, for
not
sure.
Not from my team, but from like,
in general.
I don't know. People will ask you like, oh, are you going to do nudity? Like, do you think you're going to do that? And I'm like, weird question, first of all. Or like, like people talk about like, oh, would you like be on HBO and like show your boobs on Game of Thrones? And I'm like, okay, weird question. Requires context. Right. Because it's like, okay. But also requires where I am at that point. At the current moment, like, probably not. For me right now at this moment. But I mean, we were talking about this earlier, like, there's also a level of professionalism where it's like maybe more acceptable.
If the context is right, the circumstance is right, people are being proactive in their level of commitment to privacy, security, and all like, the things. On a big budget professional set, there are lawyers. Right. Lawyers are involved. Yes. There are intimacy coordinators. I
love that that's a thing now.
Yep.
I feel like it was not until very recently. And I think that that's super important because those are also advocates for you. I think having someone to advocate for your boundaries at any time, really important because it's not always your director, unfortunately. And it's not always someone on the cast or crew. So those things, it's like, it's that's not the question. The question is not what am I willing to do?
Right. Well, essentially, if someone's asking you, what are you willing to do? What they're saying is, how much of you can I get? Well, instead of the question which they should asking is, how do I get the best of you?
Or it's just like, honestly, sometimes that sounds more like, hey, how far can I push your boundary?
Right, exactly.
Like how...
It's like, how much can I
push your boundary?
Right.
Or cross your boundary without you like getting mad at me?
Right, without me experiencing any consequences.
Yeah, or without... you pushing back on it.
Right. The question is, how do I have the best experience rather than how can I help you have the best experience?
Yeah. So I feel like, I don't know, I don't know if you've ever gotten that question when like talking about stuff, but I do think, people who are not in industry in any way or creatives will ask stuff like that. And you're like, this is not a question that you should be asking me. Cause then it again sort of is like I feel like an object. It's like, how much am I cutting off? Like how much am I willing to give away? When it's like, that's not at all what that experience should ever be like. Right. And that should not be a question that you're asking me.
Right. And just because the reason you like Game of Thrones doesn't mean that's why that person said yes to being in the cast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because that's your gross perverted type desire for why you have that subscription. That doesn't mean that everyone who got cast that was like, I want to do this type of scene and that's super hot to me. And so I'm doing that. It's like, no.
And it's like, you go into, because I feel like that was honestly sort of a question that we talked about. Like in college, we like had a professional, professional prep course. And it was like, okay, you have to like decide what you want to do, if you're going to do that or not. And I do think that was maybe phrased, I think, when I was in that age of my life as sort of like, you decide this right now and that's it. And you're never going back. And I don't feel
Which is so manipulative even in that space.
Yeah. Especially in that space, I would argue, because that's your first like interaction with that question too. And I could go on about educational theater for days, but that's beside the point. But yeah, I feel like, I don't know, that sort of question is like weird and something that I think is an ever changing thing. And
it's like, I don't know. I don't know should be good enough for you. So
yeah. Well, and it's like, I will know, like, I will know when
it's presented with the circumstance and what I know, because like you're asking me to make a huge vulnerable decision right now about a situation that doesn't exist. That I don't even know if it's
like,
real.
Be upfront with your values and your
what boundaries you
your
already
boundaries
have.
and be upfront with those things, and don't feel like you have to waver on those things. But a lot of those decisions come with a lot of context, because you saying, I'll do X amount of nudity,
I'll show this much, or I'll do this, or whatever.
In this context, it's like you doing nudity in unpaid student film and me doing nudity in like HBO Game of Thrones are two different things.
Yes.
So it's like, or it's like, and then you also think about context of like character, which is a huge thing of like, are you doing nudity for this like sexualized character or non-sexualized like nudity? It's a whole it's such a simple question for such a large,
there's so many layers to it, and it matters, and it's not just like you see it or you don't see it. Because I was having this conversation with a bodybuilder friend of mine who was basically like, okay, so then the nature of the sport is to wear a bikini and show off all your muscles, which means you are literally needing to show off your body to be evaluated so that you can win or not. Right? So the nature of it is to be exposed.
Yeah.
So a lot of bodybuilders, what they do is they practice their posing by setting up their camera in their house, and they put on their bikini, show bikini, and they do the walk and they do the thing, and it's a lot of skin because they're showing off all their muscles. Mm-hmm. And so the conversation I was having was like, so the context matters, because let's say in terms of surface area, there's probably more skin being showed in this bikini that you're wearing than the bra and underwear that you wear in everyday life, potentially. So let's say you're in your doing your posing that you're going to post on Instagram. That's normal. The context matters. Let's say you're up in your bedroom and you're just in your underwear and someone knocks on the door. Are you going to say, well, because I have this other version of me on Instagram, I should just go downstairs and open it wearing this? No, you would probably put a robe on or put something on because the context of it matters. Yeah. And we're not just focusing on, well, technically I can see as much of you or in this way or not.
Which is such a stupid.
Right.
It's the same as swimsuit versus, right, underwear.
Right. It's like, well, you posted pictures. A bikini picture of when you're at the beach. Why won't you send me this photo? And it's
it's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing. And also the reason you want it is different, and that matters. And yeah, it's hard, and I try to do everything I can to ask people what they know they do and don't want to do.
I think it's just a control thing too, of just feeling like if I am in control of a certain situation, and it's my decision, then that's different than feeling
it being taken from me.
Yeah. Then that, yeah.
Yeah, I and if people who have shot with me know this, but look, I'm really glad you said something about lines, because one of the things I always talk about with people is I ask them if they've ever danced. Mm-hmm. And the reason I do is because I try to explain posing is in a lot of ways like dance.
Yeah.
It's creating lines with your body. And you have all your lines, right? Your body is lines. It's made up of lines. And really posing is a lot of just geometry. It's making interesting shapes using your lines correctly. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be what's the most flattering. The other thing I always try to ask people is there anything about you that you don't like, or that you are self-conscious about or insecure about? If you think your nose is big and you hate a profile shot, then I'm not going to pose you in that way. Right? If you hate that, your hips or whatever, I want to know about whatever I can do to help frame you in a way that's the most appealing for you, because these photos are yours. Mm-hmm. And I did not realize. So when you start researching and you start jumping into photography, one of the things everyone always talks about is never send the clients the raw photos. Don't ever send clients raw photos. It's number one rule not to do. And I always wrestle with that, because I was like, well, this doesn't really make sense to me. Shouldn't they get to pick the photos that they want edited? And so then I was like, well, if you're going to do that, put a watermark on it, make them low res, because you can't trust the client to have high res raw photos where they could post and then misrepresent you and all the things. And I understand the branding perspective, but here's where I run into more of an ethical issue. Photos of you do not belong to me. Yeah. Just because I took it doesn't mean it's my photo to do with what I want. Yeah. And also, the emotional value of this photo is exponentially more for you than it is for me. And this idea that I take 300 photos and I send you 12 to pick 3 from to edit, where then I have 270 photos of just you that I have that you'll never see, that you might have liked way more than the 12 I picked, feels so fundamentally wrong to me.
Well, it's also operating off of your standard of beauty.
Right.
I feel
how I want to be represented, and not how you want to be represented. And
I feel I've definitely received some cuts of photo, or the 12 photos.
Yes.
Where I'm like, oh, I feel like I don't like how I look in those. And I'm sort of I'm pretty confident in most things, but yeah, you're like, I feel like I looked better in this other one.
Well, and also the idea that you would see a photo of you that you don't like put out there, regardless of what you're wearing, this idea that if as long as there's
I know we talked about nudity for a while, but this is like so beyond that.
As long, obviously it's illegal, right?
That's
clear.
That's a more sensitive issue in terms of stuff, but just in general.
But that should not be the line that photographers use for whether or not they get permission. Like your emotional security and confidence can be ruined if you feel like you're being represented by something that you don't like, or that's showcasing something that you are insecure about or that you're worried about. And the idea that a photographer should have the right. Now, in terms of when contracts are signed and money's exchanging and there's some sort of professional expectation and you say, I'm willing to do this, and you get to pick the photos and you voluntarily step into a paid situation where you know you're not in control, that's your decision to make, and then that's a separate conversation.
That's a separate thing.
And I don't ever want to, pretend to know what's actually ethically right, because I'm sure there's moral issues there. But as long as it's understood up front before you say anything, at some point, you've made that decision. But when you're just paying a local photographer to take your photos, like just because you're paying them doesn't mean they own your photos.
Yeah.
And I get that it's hard for photographers because clients are the worst at times, and people do post unedited photos. People do screenshots of the Dropbox folder instead of downloading it to their computer. And there are people who aren't as technologically savvy, and so they don't know how to get the high-res video or photo to their device without compressing it, or they email themselves the photos, right? All these things that us as tech photographer people are like, don't do this. We spent so long exporting it the right way, getting the right color profile, all these things. But my artistic validation of being good at my job is nothing compared to your emotional security and how you are represented in the world as a human being.
Yeah.
Like, they're not even close to the same. And so because I have that core belief that I know is not as shared amongst photographers as I wish it was, you get people who are like, oh, like this person only sent me 5 photos and I don't really like any of them, but they're charging me more to get more access to it. And my philosophy is kind of like, if you're going to trust me with your image and face and body and being the artist that captures you, then I'm going to trust that you will respect my request for you not to post anything that's unedited.
Yeah.
And there needs to be that level of
I think it goes
commitment
back to
and trade in that sense.
What we were talking about before. It's just, it's communication.
Right.
It's about setting up a space for free communication and open communication, and then utilizing that in terms of like,
right.
Okay, if I don't feel comfortable with this, I'll talk about it, and we can meet in the middle about those things, because it is, I know that is sensitive of, this is also your baby, like in terms of like, if it's an artistic project, especially if it's like a collaboration of, we're trading, right? Yeah. I'm trading my modeling in front of camera, my time and energy for your time, energy, equipment, etc. To create something together that we both mutually benefit from. That's obviously, this is different than like a client shoot, right? But like, that is something that, even though, we're both sort of contributing something to each other. Yeah, I think it is. I'm glad that you have that perspective about it, because it's like, it should be open, it should be communicative, and everyone should feel like no one should feel taken advantage of. And we've talked about like, guy with camera, like syndrome, old man with camera syndrome, just bought
camera and is messaging
who
girls.
Only shoots, who like only shoots like semi-nude girls, syndrome. And maybe that's, that's not what we're looking for, but expanding outside of that, just making sure that, I totally understand that because of those people, you maybe feel like you are put in that category.
The assumption is I might be, and I have to spend a lot of time proving that wrong before I get to. Yeah. And once again, I will do it. Yeah. Because
I think it's also your responsibility too.
Right. To say, well, I shouldn't, just because that person mistreated you doesn't mean you should treat me the same. that might be true technically, but I also should be empathetic to the situation. 100%. So it's like, just because, yes, I'm not responsible for any other man's inappropriate actions towards you. That's true. I'm personally not responsible. But if I want to be someone with integrity and empathy, I need to recognize that experience has adjusted and affected the way that you view this type of work potentially. And if I'm someone who wants to be empathetic and wants to be considerate, I can't dismiss your experience, treat you the way I want to treat you, and then be offended when I'm a little too direct or I'm not as considerate as I should be. If you do that, then
you are part of, you are part of the problem. Right. Like, you not being proactive about being considerate does like lump you in with like, okay, here's like a weird guy.
Right. Because it's like, even if I'm not asking you to like take your clothes off or something inappropriate, if I'm not paying attention to what you have to say, then I'm now pushing how I want to do things into this, and I'm not allowing for collaborative space. And to me, it's like, I actually want to go the opposite direction. It's like, and people will complain sometimes like, oh, you're not giving me enough specifics. It's like, yeah, but in the spectrum of how I can guarantee to have the highest odds of being appropriate and respectful, I would rather you feel like you have too much, the ball's in your court too much, and ask me to do more than the opposite.
And then like on the opposite end, it's, okay, models, whoever that you're shooting, it's like you have given them the space to feel ownership, and they can take that. And I am someone who will ask, especially for like photography and stuff, be like, do you have any direction? Like, is there, I'll ask also if there's a way that we're going. Cause also, especially with collaborative situations, it's like, what are you trying to achieve here? And what am I trying to achieve? And how can we achieve that together? So,
yeah. Cause I'll have people who reach out and want to do trade shoots. And I'll kind of always be open to that, because I would rather meet new people than just get paid.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I would rather help people than not. I'd rather have a huge network of people and only make money from a third of them than have a small network of people that I only make money from.
Yeah.
And just at a more conceptual level. But a lot of people will say like, hey, I want to do this trade thing. And if it's a shoot that they have concepts for, then I'm like, then you're leading this. I will show up, I will take your photo, and I will give you the photos, and that's that. But when someone's like, hey, do you need me for your portfolio? This is going to be a great opportunity for both of us. That's not always true. Like, and I feel kind of rude saying, even though I know it's not, but it's like, I actually don't really need anything else in a portfolio. Like, I have a clientele, I have a reputation, I'm settled in what I'm doing, and I feel like I have skills that are objectively qualified to get paid to use. So creative
and especially
stuff,
like for what you're doing, it's like, okay, you can, I think you feel confident in what you're doing.
Right.
If you ever wanted to step out and do something else, like, I don't know if you do like videography as much, but, if you were trying to look into a specific kind of videography or wanted to work more in the, like, I don't know, film aspect. Okay, maybe I
would have to adjust.
You would have to adjust your expectations
of what I can do and what I would do for free.
But it really is just everyone's got their different goals and stuff like that. And I think it's not rude to.
No.
I mean, we've talked about setting boundaries of like, okay, eventually, like, yes, work for free, not earn your keep, but like
get experience,
right? And then you earn your like rate,
right?
But there is a point in time where
you just gotta stop saying yes to free stuff.
Yeah, but I really do feel like you have to start taking yourself seriously for other people to start taking you seriously, and that's something that I'm like telling myself too. Of just like, it's really easy to be like, oh, I'm so happy to be here. Like, I'm just
glad you want me to be involved.
Yeah, and I am like, I am so grateful and so happy for all of the opportunities that come my way. But there is definitely like a point in which I had to be like, okay,
yes,
I do think that if it's something that is not mutually beneficial in terms of, I feel like I'm learning if I've already learned that skill, maybe I should be paid for it, you know? So
and setting that boundary is I think is important. And I think people who push back probably don't have a fundamental understanding of what it took, right? Like when people are wanting to shoot for free, or if they have a visceral response to my quote, then it's hard to say, but it's like, you don't understand what it takes then. Yeah. Because there's
especially
ranges.
On
if I'm like, hey, it's $1,500 for this 2-hour shoot of photos, like that's
you're paying for experience, and it's like, okay, do you feel like you're giving $1,500 worth of experience, technicality?
Yeah, if I have 7 people
service.
Who have to be here, that's different than if it's just me.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I really do like empathize for a photography aspect, because it's expensive, just technically. Right. It's expensive. You know, on one hand, it's like, I, as a model or actor or whatever, like I bring a certain amount of experience, time, and in a way like upkeep of myself.
Yes.
But I don't have a physical camera that I'm bringing that's $1,000, you know? So I really do like, I am so grateful to anyone who has taken my photos for free. I love and adore you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
For sure.
I love and adore you. My God. And like film photography, that has gotten so expensive. Anyone who has taken photos of me on film for free, I owe you my life.
Right.
Thank you
it's
so
much.
Expensive. I have some cherished photos of myself that were taken on film, that was like a couple years ago, but I love them so much. And I'm like so grateful that I ever got that opportunity. Right. Because all of that is so expensive.
Yes.
I mean, all of it's expensive. Right. But so thank you.
Yeah, no,
appreciate you.
That's so hard, because you can't say that. It's so hard to say that to someone. Where it's like, just so you know, the price tag of everything that I showed up with to this shoot is about the same as what your car is worth.
100%.
That brought you.
I mean, when did you? How long did it take for you to like break even on?
2.5, 3 years. Yeah. Right. Like, and I'm still breaking even because I'm continuing to invest in things. And it's like, okay, this camera is $3,500. Well, now I need to book, 3 or 4 shoots and projects to pay for that. Yeah. And when I'm making money, I'm not like going and buying myself a nice car or nice things. It's like, no, I'm paying off that. And then I'm ready to get the next thing so that I can do a better version of what I'm doing. And it's hard, and it's tough too when people like they'll spend their own money buying a nice camera or whatever, and then they'll charge like a third of what you would charge for an hour. And it's like, and people aren't smart enough necessarily to know that the experience that person brings is not going to be as good.
It's the perspective. It's also the time you've invested into learning how to use that camera. I have a nice expensive camera that I'm so grateful I was gifted. Right. But I don't know how to use it. Right. I'm not going to become a photographer and charge people for it. Right. But I can invest time into learning. I really feel for y'all. I'm like, I love my camera people. Yes. I appreciate my camera people.
We love
I'm
that.
the nicest to my camera people.
And you are what keeps us going.
I treat you all with as much respect as I can.
Love it.
Because I know that shit is expensive. Yeah.
It's so nice when people appreciate or even just acknowledge that, like, dang, this is a lot of equipment that you have. And, you brought a lot of fancy things. That's super cool.
Listen, in general, I'm like, hey, my film crew, love you. Like, I feel like I have to be so appreciative. I mean, not I have to, but like, I have to in the way that I'm like, oh my God, you guys do so much work. I just show up and I'm pretty. Like, oh my God. I have some friends that like I met through doing like UT student films, and they tease me all the time for, because they're all crew, and they always tease me that I'm talent.
It's when you acknowledge that there's a lot more empathy when people like are aware. It's when they don't know.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. You're like, eye roll. Yeah. No, I love my camera folks. I'm always like, what does that button do? But learning about it on the other end, is helpful. It's always helpful. Especially when
so helpful to have the person you're working with knows a little bit about what you're doing.
Because I'm always like, I mean, I don't know anything about anything, but I like to listen at least when we're like, they're like, okay, we're swapping a lens. I'm like, ooh, we're swapping a lens.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are we going to? What lens are we going to now?
Right.
Okay. But I mean, it's nice to know because then you're like, okay, what's frame?
Mm-hmm.
Are we going in? Are we,
right.
What's happening?
Yeah. How much?
And they don't always tell you too, because
right.
it's like, there's so much happening that they're not like, okay, Luxy, we're swapping to this lens
right.
and this is like, if you have a really good like DP and director and everyone, like anyone on set who's like, okay, this is
right.
what's happening. But I like at least listening and being like, okay, I think I like have an idea of what we're doing. I think we're punching in like, okay, all right. So I'm learning, but I like
that's good. No, that's all you can do. All right. Before we get wrapped up, this happens every time, which is we just talk, and then I never open up a space for other people to ask questions. So I know I've asked you a lot of questions. I told you can prepare something if you had a question for me.
Oh my gosh. I know we've talked about so much.
In general, but I can always have other questions to ask.
I've asked you a couple questions. Well, now I'm drawing a blank.
That's okay. Some people just don't come prepared.
Well, we've talked about, I feel like we went on sort of a tangent.
We did.
Beyond what I thought we were going to talk about.
That's the joy
which
of
is
it.
good.
That's
which
the
is,
point.
I'm
and
glad.
Then you'll come back for round 2 and then
we'll do a
you'll
part
have more
2.
to say. You can sit in this seat and interview me.
Well, I'm glad that we've talked more about your like photography and stuff like that. Because I feel like we haven't really caught up about it. So, because I don't really know you in that perspective. I feel like I've only known you as also a performer, which is sort of funny because that's like not necessarily what you do now. But I guess maybe what's like. Sorry, continue.
No. You had a question.
Well, I was just gonna say like, what is like something. This is completely unrelated to photography, but I guess like creatively, like what is like a mantra that you sort of abide and live by, or that like keeps you going? Or not like mantra, but just kind of perspective.
So I'm generally a pretty I like to consider myself a philosophical person. So I actually spend a lot of time thinking about like what are deep fundamental values that I have. For me, especially in the creative space, what will always be most important to me is that I'm always looking to serve others before I look to satisfy my own desires. Where when I can, I want to be someone who gives more than he takes, who looks to find ways to build other people up or to meet a need that they have, because I believe true joy is found much more in serving those around you who you love and watching that affect them than to have this persona of what can I do for me. And I get that we are kind of in the self-love culture and era of take care of yourself, you do what you got to do, F anybody else who has anything else to say about it. And I agree that there's a level of self-maintenance that we need to do so that you can be effective in the world. But I truly believe that if you look to serve before you look to be served, you will actually have more joy, that your life will actually be better. And if people are trying to outserve each other, that's a much healthier space than everybody who's trying to just make it what they want it to be. And so especially in the creative space, I have found that there is no paycheck that feels better or more rewarding than someone who sends me a message that says, Dave, I can't believe this is what I look like. I can't believe that I have these photos of me for the rest of my life. I had a friend of mine, we're now friends. She was referred to me when I went to New York, and she, had shared she was struggling with being in front of the camera. There were some insecurities around her figure that she wanted to kind of lean into and help kind of conquer, or at least work on. And so doing a shoot was a part of it. And so a friend of mine who knew me was like, hey, he's a safe person to work with. He's willing to work with whatever you want to do. And so first of all, you would have never known that she's beautiful, like stunning, amazing human being. You would have never known that she had any insecurities because you'd be like, why would you? But we had an amazing shoot and it was super fun. But we had whatever, we finished, and a couple days later I sent her the photos. And probably 4 or 5 hours after I sent the email, I just get this voice message from her. And she goes, Dave, I've been looking at these photos for the last 15 minutes with just tears in my eyes. Because I've never felt the way about myself that I feel about myself when I'm looking at these photos. And this is not to say that I'm some sort of amazing photographer, super technically talented. Anybody who picks up a camera and does the effort to learn the technique could have taken these same photos. But what I learned was I chose to take part in a craft that, when done correctly, can be profoundly impactful on someone's view of themselves, their feelings about themselves, even their self-worth and their confidence. And not that your full value is found in what you look like, but you do have an image that does affect how you feel. And so to be confident and to be proud of that is to live a life with a much more joy.
Yeah.
And so I just try to approach, I know we talked about this, but like when I'm even in creative spaces, as much as I could be like, I want to get great photos, I want to have this beautiful portfolio, I want everyone to hire me and think that I'm super talented, I'm still here to make sure that you get what you need. And if I get great photos that I can use, great. But I'm not going to spend time marketing all these photos so that I can get new shoots. I'm going to work with you, get you your photos, get them to you faster than I told you I would, edit more than I told you I would, and be stupid as a professional, because as a human being, I'm way more satisfied with you and your response of like, I am so moved. And that's like the mantra for me, right? Is, hey, can I serve you more than what you think? Because I will actually have a better experience. Yeah. I might make less money. I might get people who are reaching out to me to do free stuff. I might be taken advantage of, but I'm happier. I feel more fulfilled, and I have more people coming to me with similar values who I work with, right? And so if like attracts like, what I put out, that's who will come back to me. And I think that reputation-wise, in a world of male photographers who don't always have proper intentions, I will hopefully not be included in them. And when someone is worried that I might, I can do what I need to clarify, to explain. And also, I probably will say something or suggest an outfit or do something that's crossing a boundary. And when I'm faced with that, then it's my responsibility to apologize, to say, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't know about that. That wasn't my intention. That's not what I wanted to do. And look to repent and reconcile and figure those things out, because I don't want someone to pay me money if they feel like I'm not worthy of the work and the craft and the art and vice versa. And so that's really just how I kind of want to live my life in general, like to be someone who gives more than he takes. But specifically in the creative space, I just found that it's more rewarding than being like, whose toes can I step on to get to where I want to be? Because Absolutely. I've met people who have done that, and they have all the money in the world and they have no one around. I met a lot of people who moved to LA who were like, I made all these friends, and then as soon as I got my big break, they like abandoned me because I like rejected them, or they thought that like, once I got something they couldn't have, they got mad at me, or vice versa. They got their big break and I realized that I was just a networking opportunity and nothing more. And I will network and I will use relationships to help me, but not at the expense of human decency and like meaningful relationship. Yeah. So
I'm really glad you said that. That's it's something that I've been thinking about recently too. Well, in terms of like network versus community. And I think that just community is so important.
It's better. Yeah. It's like at the end of the day, when I'm 90 years old, I'd rather look back and be like, here's whose lives I impacted for the better, versus like, here's the cool things I got to do. Yeah. And hopefully I can say both. Like, hopefully I'll be able to say, like, I did all these cool things, but, like, my joy will not come from my professional success.
No.
I might find joy in my professional success, but the, like, truly satisfying, rewarding things will not be my name, you know, or image up in Times Square as a photo.
Art doesn't have to be suffering.
Right.
I think it should be full of so much joy. And I think that's also something that people talk about, like, you really suffer for your art. And, like, yeah, you do, but it should be joyful. And it should be fulfilling as well. Because then why are you doing it if it's just suffering?
Or if you're just trying to attain some external affirmation that you think is going to make you feel filled. And it's like, the data's in on that.
Yeah.
Like, you talk to anybody who's made everything that they could have ever wanted, and what are they saying? I got here and I'm still asking what else is there.
Well, and it's like, at the end of the day too, there's so much that's out of our control, especially when you're talking about checks, when you're talking about industry, when you're talking about all that stuff. Shit can shut down.
Right.
As we've seen.
Yes.
And if you don't have any satisfaction outside of that, or you're also just not a person outside of that.
Right.
What's you, like, fill your life with things. Fill your life with things that make you happy. And that doesn't have to be the thing that your one artistic, like, passion. Like, it can be, but fill your life with people and friends and all of that.
And oftentimes you will enjoy that one thing more.
Yeah.
When it's not what provides you life.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's something that I feel like I've definitely learned. I feel like you don't think about it when you're really, really trying to pursue something, but then you sort of step back and you're like, yeah, I want to also, like, enjoy my life outside of my career, because I'm not my career. Right.
And this is a means to greater joy, not the other way around. My life and my friends are a means to my job.
I can't monetize being a good friend.
Right.
But it's really important to me. I can't monetize being there for my family, but it's something that I should have in my life.
And it will
bring me
profoundly more satisfying to be a good friend and a good daughter and a good spouse someday, maybe, and a good parent. Like, being good at those things will provide you way more joy than being talented or good at a job.
Yep.
And you can be both. It's not one or the other.
No.
But the belief that your true joy will come from a certain amount of money or fame or success from any sort of objective standard, it's just not founded in reality, at least without context.
Yeah.
Because it's everybody at the top of every industry has said, what else is there? Like, I thought this would be what I want. There's like famous Tom Brady 60 seconds, whatever, 60 minutes interview where he's like, I've achieved everything I've ever wanted. 3 Super Bowls at the time, whatever, this like highest level of success. And he's like, I'm still wondering what else is there? And musicians who are like,
isn't he getting divorced too?
Yeah.
Damn.
I know. Right. It's like Jeff Bezos divorced, right? Elon Musk divorced. Like,
I mean, nothing's wrong with divorce.
No, right. It's just like,
but like, life
just
still
your job is not going to provide. Right.
No matter how talented, no matter how rich you are. I feel like that's something that I really realized, like, this year, in terms of, like, I don't know. I, like, started seeing celebrities as people. It's like weird. It's like when you see, like, your parents as people too. And you're like, oh yeah, she's just a girl too. Right. Like, she, you know, and you see people, like, I don't know, you just think about it and you're like, oh, my shit, like, doesn't go away. Right. You, like, your insecurities, your whatever, your relationship with your family, your relationship with your partner, just interpersonal stuff, you know, stuff that you need to work on does not go away. The minute you achieve something that you've really wanted to achieve, if you
wake
still
up the next day
have,
and it's still you.
Yeah, if you, like, still have, like, stuff that you're working on, like, it's not going to go away.
Right.
And yeah, anyways.
Well, we have talked at length.
I know,
and
but
so,
this is fabulous.
You know, it really was. And first of all, thanks for being here.
Of course.
And
thank you for having me.
I'm so glad that you came.
This was also an exercise in me, like, doing something that I don't normally do, you know?
Awesome. So, yeah. Well, I have asked, there's a lot of people who have said no. who I've been like, hey, I'd love, once again, it's the impossible slide into your DMs, you don't know me thing. It's like,
I know you.
Right, you know me, but there are people who don't. But I'm like, you're big in modeling or you're big in film or theater, or you're a business owner, like I'd love to have you on. But some people are like, I just don't know what I would say, which totally understandable. I respect
That's the thing.
that.
I feel like I was like, oh, what do I say? And I was like, well, you talk and just be honest.
If you just talk and a lot of times that's what people I think want to.
You're pretty easy to talk to. So
that's good.
Yeah.
I'm trying to attain the what's his name from Hot Ones.
Oh, I don't know I forgot his name. Sean Evans. Yeah.
Sean Evans.
Oh, he's great.
I think his questions of he asks really specific questions. He knows what he wants to say. And he also asks about things that people don't normally talk about.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love about podcasts in general, or getting to do this, is that a lot of people will never get the experience of being interviewed.
Yeah.
There's this idea that I'm important enough for someone to want to sit down and listen to me and ask me questions and get my thoughts. That's a really validating feeling. And we all have something to say.
Yeah.
We all are arguing and venting to people about our deepest feelings and passions. And I think that's a really cool gift to give someone, which is, hey, I would love to hear what you have to say about these things. And then also provide that as a resource for you to then share with people in your life, right? If you listen back to this and you're like, hey, I really like this clip. Can we use this? Can I put that? I want that to be available, but also I just think the experience itself can be so valuable. Even if all, 12 people watch it or listen to it, that's fine. This isn't for them. This is for you and for me, and we'll make it available. And if people want to listen to it, they can. I just think that so few people would get that opportunity. And I have the equipment and the time and the skill set to make it happen technically. And I have the relational desire to meet with people and have a one-on-one conversation with them. And my hope is that people walk away from this time being like, well, if anything happens, even if all the cameras died, I still had a good time.
Yeah.
I still felt.
I think we also, at least for, I think in general, you can always learn something from anyone, but I think especially just talking about what we have, I think there's a lot to learn and think about and reflect.
And that people don't think about. Yeah. And people will know a lot more about what it is that you do and all the cool stuff. So I just want to say, thank you. Also, just want to encourage you, please continue to be Luxy because,
thank you.
You have such a authentic version of yourself that you are not afraid to let the world see. And I'm sure a lot of it's selective vulnerability. And I'm sure you, we all do, you put stuff up to hide this stuff and vice versa. We all do that. But there's an added level of just representation of who you are that I think people don't often do on social media.
Thank you.
Because it's dangerous, it's scary.
I appreciate that.
I appreciate that. So it's an encouragement and a motivator for me as well to be I'm just going to post this thing because it's funny and I like it. And even if it's embarrassing, that's okay. Not to say you've posted anything that I think you should be embarrassed about.
I definitely have.
But I like that. And you're also outspoken about what you believe we should be working on in the world. So please continue to do that. And
Thank
I look
you.
forward to all of your cool projects
You too.
that you are in. If you're in a show that makes it to the streaming services, I'll be there supporting. Unless it's on Peacock, because right now I don't pay for Peacock.
That's okay.
But if you get a Peacock show, take it.
I'll give you my Peacock password if you want.
You can't, But what if
they're gonna find out?
What if they find out?
It's okay.
At this point,
I've been watching a lot of
if
Below
a
Deck.
Peacock executive is watching this podcast,
we've won actually.
I've always thought about that, where it's if you ever get to the point where you're being exposed for a scandal, that means you're a big enough deal that you are probably already a big enough deal. Right? It's I know it's kind of weird to think about, but by the time anything goes wrong for you online, it's because someone cares enough about you to talk about you.
There you go.
So that's where I find comfort in. If I say something that's ignorant and terrible, which I'm sure I will at some point.
Oh God.
Either no one will hear it or enough people will hear it that it's worth talking about, in which case got that
you said all press is good press.
Yeah, well, it is what it is. All right, I'm gonna let you go. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
I know we'll stay in touch and all the things, but you're the best.
Thank you. You too. Thank you for having me.
Of course.